talking about Santana and Mark Canha. They're both older. I guess league averagey veterans would be a nice way to describe them. But when you consider that the Brewers have kind of been getting a lot less than that at first base and the non-Yelich corner outfielders this year, still could be significant upgrades. So on that note, let's just get started with our Patreon questions this week, because Jay Google's leading us off with the question of just how big of an upgrade is Santana over what the Brewers had. Seems to be massive. So I guess, Paul, let's start with you. Obviously, first base kind of been a black hole. They threw all sorts of spaghetti at the wall, as you like to say. Yep. None of it stuck. So is this spaghetti that's a little bit more done, could stick a little bit more?
Yeah, I think Carlos Santana is a known quantity. It's not even spaghetti. This is just buying something that you can pretty well count on, which is an averagey bat at first base and good defense at first base, if not great. And the Brewers have been throwing out so many sub replacement player, even if not players, sub replacement performances. It's so many positions, including Rowdy at first base and Owen Miller at first base and whoever else they have stand over there at any given time. It almost can't help but be a significant upgrade, and should be a significant upgrade. And he's the kind of player who really probably shouldn't be on most contenders a significant upgrade. He would just be depth on most teams. But here, you're getting, I think, a several win upgrade over the course of a season at least. And yeah, Carlos Santana should help a lot. He's something he's a guy you can count on to play competent baseball day in and day out. And a formerly quite good player. You might even get luck into a solid month here if you get lucky. So yeah, good move for not much value. I'll go the other way. Well done there.
And he has been better since the summer started. He got off to a pretty slow start this year, but he has heated up as the weather warmed up. So there's that as well. But he's pretty clearly I'm not going to say he's on his last legs as a useful player, but just look at his walk rate over the years. In 2020, he was at 18%. And it has since dropped to 13 and 14. I know 11.7 this year. 11.7 is still a very good walk rate, and it has him getting on base almost almost 100 points higher than his batting average. But there isn't a ton of slug left in there. We've seen it as Brewers fans. We've seen him hit a couple of his home runs. One for us,
against the Brewers.
Yep.
Yeah, and one for the Pirates against us, which sucked. But yeah, I mean he's a guy sort of nearing the end of his run, but he was a very, very good player in his prime, a very underrated player, I think, in a lot of ways. And so you're kind of, getting the last bit of value out of him here. And as Paul pointed out, and as we're going to get into with the other acquisition as well, it's just such a big upgrade over what they had been getting this year that it helps. And really the thing here too is that Santana doesn't really block Rowdy Tellez, who's been their primary first baseman this year until he got hurt, for when he hopefully does come back from that weird ass injury that he had. Because you can just slide Tellez over to DH. There's really no problem there. You can do that without really an issue. So this doesn't block other players who are returning from injury, returning from underperformance. This doesn't really block anybody. It helps add depth. And we were talking right before we started about the defensive thing, because those of you who are Fangraphs devotees will note that he is, they have him as being negative 4.9 runs this year. But then if you go over and look at Prospectus, Paul, you had those numbers. What was that?
That he is plus that's 2023. He's plus 2.7 defensive runs this year. So, not super great, but better than average.
Right. And he has a great defensive reputation, and he's built that over the years. But one of the things that's difficult about first base in terms of, it's probably, now that so much of catcher has kind of been figured out, other than the game calling stuff, the real soft factor stuff, I think first base is the hardest position to evaluate, because scooping is really hard. Trying to figure out what mistake belongs to the guy throwing the ball to the first baseman and what belongs to the first baseman is really hard. And by all accounts, he seems to be pretty good at that, but that's a harder thing to measure, and I think that's where some of this discrepancy comes in. So I do think he's still a solid to good first baseman, definitely better than what they were running out there with Owen Miller and even Rowdy. We talked a lot about how good or not Rowdy is defensively in the past. But Santana, I think, is clearly better than him defensively. So you would want him in at first base when him and Rowdy are both on the field, which is fine because Rowdy can go over to DH.
All right. As for the other addition at this point, Mark Canha, got a couple of questions today on this already. One from PJ Wessels with the wordplay tongue twister. Can Mark Canha help? And then you're either a smart fella or a fart smella asking, where will you be when Mark Canha wins World Series MVP? Definitely seems like the kind of random ass World Series MVP. But, he's a guy that I've actually really liked for a long time. I know I kind of coveted him when he was a free agent just a couple of years ago, and he went to the Mets instead. Just a very... of course, he was with Oakland before, a very easy player and on base, okay-ish, solid corner defense, but maybe not a lot in the way of power, Paul. So I guess, how can he help?
I think AZ is a great description for Mark Canha, he's good at getting, he plays a typical power position, either first base or being stuck out in left field, but does not bring power. He slugs around 400, but he's very good at getting on base. He also is very Brewer in that he has reverse platoon splits both this year and for his career, because of course he does. He's a right-handed batter who hits righties better than lefties, and it gets on base against righties at a 360 clip. So, and, has decent slugging. He's like a 422 guy for his career. But, he's not a big bopper. He's just got a good eye, and he has good control of the zone, and he has kind of Brewer versatility, and then he can play first base or outfield cromulently. And he can help because getting on base is still the most important offensive skill to have, and he does it. And the Brewers sometimes lack in that area. So you can play him in a lot of spots. He can get on base to get driven in by somebody else, and you could do a lot worse. He will be again a fairly major upgrade over a lot of the outfield and first base depth that the Brewers have been throwing out there. So yeah, again, another kind of savvy move for not that much going back to the other way either.
Yep. The WRC plus differential is pretty stark when you look at it. He has a 107 WRC plus this year, and the Brewers out of right field this year have gotten a 75 WRC plus.
Goodness.
So,
real bad.
And that's actually 28th. There's two teams that are worse in right field than that. It's unbelievable. But yeah,
that is unbelievable.
There are actually two teams worse than that. So this is an upgrade in that sense. Again, the defense here, his defense isn't as good as it used to be. He actually seems to sort of consistently have low defensive grades here.
His defensive numbers are pretty consistently poor across all three metrics. So yes.
And that can be very easily addressed because the Brewers happen to have a lot of really good defensive outfielders. So when he's in games and they're holding close leads in the 6th, 7th inning, you will see him get subbed out a lot. I think he will be a guy that is he plays a lot to start games, maybe 3 times through the order, and then you'll see Joey Wiemer, Sal Frelick, somebody else, Blake Perkins, somebody else end up over there in right field for him, which is totally fine and a great way to handle this. Looping back to what you talked about, the thing these guys do is they get on base, and that has been a problem for the Brewers this year. If I have one criticism about this, it's that. And it's hard because there haven't really been big boppers who have moved, so this is difficult. But they kind of had more of a need, I feel like, for power than they did for getting on base. But getting on base is the most important thing that batters can do, and yeah, it's still important. And the other thing, just looking at these guys, both have strikeout rates about 17%. Yeah. And so they're going to give you professional at-bats when they're in there. Like these, I think that is the biggest thing that you're going to see from Carlos Santana and Mark Canha is just professional at-bats. They're going to go in and they're going to make pitchers throw them strikes, and they will do a decent job of when they do get pitches to hit of making contact on them, but won't necessarily do the damage that you would hope. But you're not going to get perfect players, especially at this trade deadline, especially when you don't want to give up your top guys, which the Brewers don't. So
it's hard to understand, so hard to